Hi friend, I'm so glad you could join me this afternoon. Today we're going to talk about your inheritance. And before you tell me that you don't have an inheritance, I am here to tell you that you do. I do. Now, it's probably not an inheritance like you're thinking. You don't have some long-lost relative that you never knew about that's left you a great sum of money. But you have an inheritance far beyond all comparison of anything on this earth, an inheritance that far outweighs any trouble or tribulation that you could encounter here on earth. So let's get into what that inheritance is. Now, if you're like me, you probably don't have that rich relative. I know for me, when my father passes away, he's already told me that I'll get his Cadillac. It's a pretty nice car. So I'm not going to say anything bad about that, but definitely not $1 million or anything like that. Nothing that's going to change my life significantly, but that's okay. So today I was studying in Joshua 18. I read the Bible one chapter at a time, so today it's Joshua 18. And what was interesting in today's verse is that after the Israelites, which is made up of 12 tribes, after they had conquered Jericho and then they started to divide up the promised land, 7 of those tribes had yet to take their inheritance from God. God, as a loving father, he provided for the Israelites his children. He provided something that could not be taken away from them, which was land. To get this land, they did have to fight the people who currently live there, and there were giants, and there were people living there that had, greater weapons, iron chariots, but God was with them. The Israelites had the greatest power of all to overcome the people living in the land currently. All they had to do was go and take it. But 7 of these tribes had not. And as any loving father would, Joshua says it's time to push them out of the nest in Joshua 18:3. So Joshua said to the sons of Israel, "How long will you put off entering to take possession of the land which the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you?" So Joshua says it's time to go to your permanent home. Now, what are the reasons why these 7 tribes had not gone into their land yet? It could be that they were afraid of the people that lived in the land. It could be that they were just comfortable where they were. Maybe they had grown to like being squished in with all the other tribes in their land. They had close-knit relationships with those in other tribes, and they didn't want to be separated from them by many miles. It could also be that they were lazy, and here's why I think this. Because of the word that Joshua uses in verse 3. In the NASB version, he says, "How long will you put off?" But in the King James Version, the word used is slack. And when I think of the word slack, I think of the word slacker. And when I think of a slacker, I think of someone who is lounging around. They have work to do, but they don't want to do that work. They're very unmotivated to do that work for whatever reason. They're comfortable where they're at, and they don't see any reason of why that needs to change. So, sometimes I know when I read through the Old Testament, I can be very quick to judge, especially the Israelites with all of their grumbling, their complaining, the times that they backslide, the time that God gives them a clear direction and even promises to be with them, and they still don't trust him. Like, I think to myself, haven't you guys seen God work enough times to rely upon him to get you through this current mess? But then I remember, as I have one finger pointed toward them, I have 3 fingers pointed toward me. Because how many times have I been like that too, where God has gotten me through a mess, but the next time something comes up, then I'm once again freaking out and trying to figure it out in my own strength. So here they are, not wanting to fight the Canaanites that are currently in the land God has given them. So they're just going to stay where they're at and kind of be squished among the other tribes in their land instead of doing the work of getting to their permanent resting place. And how many times have I traded doing hard work or doing work that I know I need to do for something better in the future for what I can have now? Going to that car lot and getting that nice looking car, but also paying a really high interest rate instead of working on my credit over the period of a few months and saving money to buy a good used car outright, or indulging in that piece of pizza or that ice cream, which are my weaknesses, instead of choosing the salad and over a period of time getting back into my clothes that don't fit again. So I am exactly like the Israelites, so in that case I can't really be a judge of them now, can I? Now, what is the inheritance that we as believers have from God? And that is told to us in Ephesians. Let me get over there. Ephesians chapter 1, verses 18 and 19. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, so that you will know what is the hope of his calling, what are the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints, and what is the surpassing greatness of his power toward us who believe. These are in accordance with the working of his strength and his might. So 3 things are listed as our inheritance from God. First is the hope of his calling. So he called you to be his child, to be his son, to be his daughter. He called you and you answered the call. But he also has a calling upon your life to bring him glory in whatever you do, whether that's at your job. He may have a specific thing for you to do. He may call you to be a missionary. So as his child, part of your inheritance in Christ is a calling upon your life to do work for him and to glorify him in that work. The second thing we see here is the riches of the glory of his inheritance. Now, what is the riches of the glory of his inheritance? Well, those are things that may seem distant, may be hard to associate with. When we think of riches, we think of a lot of money, fame, a big house, a fancy car. These are things that people have that show us that they are rich or that they have money. But the things that are rich in God's kingdom are not those things. The rich things in God's kingdom are his grace. We have the forgiveness of sins for all of our sins, present, past, and future. We have his redemption. He's made us new. He's made us a new creation. He exchanged our rags for his robes of righteousness. We have his holiness. We are being transformed moment by moment, day by day, to be more holy. As he says in his word, be holy for I am holy. We are sanctified and we are set apart. These are the riches and so many more that are found in him and in his glory. And then the third thing we have is the surpassing greatness of his power. So the things that he calls us to do, he gives us his strength and his power to accomplish. He doesn't just tell us to do these things and then say, I'll check back in with you next month to see how well you're doing. He is with us. He is in us. He is giving us his strength and his power as his inheritance to help us accomplish these things he set out for us to do. And unlike an earthly inheritance, which we only will receive once our family member passes away, God's inheritance are things that we have available to us now, today. He extends his hand with these things in it to us. We just have to believe that they're there and in faith take them and act in them. So yes, we have an inheritance in heaven of glorified bodies. and of eternity with Jesus. But we also have his inheritance of these things available to us now. So I want to encourage you today, friend, and for myself as well, let's not be like those 7 tribes who were comfortable where they're at, who didn't want to do the work God asked them to do, to take the land he promised to them, that he had given them. It was waiting for them. They just had to go get it. Let's encourage each other in our calling, in our purpose, in our walk with Christ. Let's remind each other of the riches of his glory when we are driving around our used car that's fully paid for, or when we're going to the thrift store for clothes. Let's not lose sight of the riches that we may not have right now, but we have in the future. And then also, let's encourage each other to act in the strength and the power that God gives us now whenever we face that wall, or whenever we pass through those waters that are deeper than we are tall, or whenever we come up to those giants, that we have God's power and we have his strength in us and with us to help us overcome those obstacles. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that we have an inheritance that far outweighs anything that we have on this earth, and that comes from 2 Corinthians 4:17 and 18. For momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison, while we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So we may not have everything that God has promised to us here on this earth while we live here, but we will have those things in heaven fully. And we also need to not rush the process. We read in the Bible, in one verse, there's people going out to survey the land that has yet to be conquered, and in the next verse they're coming back. How long was that journey? And in Josephus tells us that journey was about 7 months. So it's God's working in you, his power, his strength, his holiness. That's not an overnight process. That's a lifelong process. So don't be discouraged if you feel like you're not making progress, if you don't see much forward movement. It's there. Just trust God to work those things in you, in his will. And in the meantime, just continue to go to his word and to study his character and to let his word dwell in you richly, as it says in Colossians. Don't lose sight of that inheritance that he's working in you and that he's preparing for you in heaven. I hope this has encouraged you today, friend, and I pray you have a good rest of your day.